I've certainly spent much of my professional time as a consultant wondering what really creates change within a system. There are numerous variables, often many of them competing, but I think one significant key to creating and sustaining change is the degree of decision-making, control, and power one has over the change. If a change is being forced upon me, I tend to be much more resistant than a change about which I have some degree of input or consensus, often experienced through some type of process. And sometimes the process is just as important as the change itself. As children, we often feel subjected to our parents' choices, and most of the time, parents are making decisions that have our best interest at the forefront of their decision-making, or at least that's what I've tried to do as a parent. But as much as I think I know what's best, I'm not in the generation of my children, whether I want to admit that or not, and they have a vantage point and insight that I may be missing when I'm making a decision that could impact them. Now let's take a step back and look from a more macro lens or view, from family to neighborhood to community. How do the adults in any community know what the youth need? A general guiding principle in good consulting is to ask the people who are closest to the issue, concern, or even when strategy planning. This is true in every industry. So why aren't we more often asking youth and communities how to improve the issues with which they struggle and capitalize on their capacity to brainstorm possible solutions? What an interesting opportunity that would be. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others, and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. One new movement is doing just what I was talking about in the introduction through a process known as youth-driven collective impact, asking youth ages 15 to 19 to come together to solve the issues that plague their respective environments while learning from each other in the process. SparkShare began as a response to youth not being engaged in problem-solving the issues that directly impacted them. Neil Silverstein, co-founder and executive director, and Marcia Alprin, co-founder and board chair, and Vicky Raykov, co-founder and board member, saw this gap and began to address it through large-scale meetings where invited youth are asked to be partners with adults in addressing youth-identified issues that impact their respective communities. Neil has been an organizing leader on poverty and opportunity, building community, and interfaith collaborations around gun violence reduction, economic opportunity, and immigration. SparkShare's goal is to empower young people to be the change agents in their own communities as well as in their own lives. There are 3 driving principles that guide their work: listening to young people articulate what holds them and their peers back from opportunity, connecting youth with the resources and organizations they need so they can solve the problems they identify, and building partnerships that enable youth and adults to work together to create positive, lasting change in their community. I am so very excited to introduce my guest today, co-founder and executive director Neil Silverstein and deputy director Sabita Jarba. So let's get started. Welcome, Neil and Sabita. Please share your passion and how it all began. And Neil, I'm going to start it with you because you have a history, and Sabita, then I'll move to you.
Thanks, Laura. We're really grateful. We, as you said, SparkShare is trying to create the next generation of problem solvers. We're after transformational change. Our approach is that bringing people together, building networks, is the unit of change in the 21st century. What we're talking about is spreading change, spreading best practice, and really finding a way to bring people together. How did this start? You mentioned my background in organizing, and what sparked my interest in this work is a number of years ago, I had taken on a role in my synagogue as a lay leader. I was vice president of Tikkun Olam, which Tikkun means to repair, Olam means the world. So it's repair the world, social justice. I had a desire to see us get out into the public square. But what was that going to look like? And all of a sudden, this gun tragedy happened in Newtown, Connecticut at Sandy Hook. And synagogues and churches and mosques all across the community said that we've got to get activated on gun violence. And that was true with us. But the reality was, we in our suburban congregation got activated on gun violence because, if we're being honest with ourselves, because kids who looked a lot like our kids got gunned down. And we understood that this is about the safety of all of our kids, that violence happens in many different forms in many different communities, and that if we were going to make a difference, that we'd have to work across communities. So we set out to build a coalition that became the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, and we worked with synagogues and churches, policymakers across Greater Boston, really built a coalition that resulted in meaningful gun violence prevention legislation with both the former governor, Governor Patrick, and our current governor, Governor Baker. My role in all this was I was a fire starter, a convener, a connector. I was really energized by reaching across communities and decided this is the work I want to do, and that being bringing people together across communities to make change. And that manifests itself in SparkShare. And since that time, actually it started well beyond Newtown, but we built a network of youth organizations looking to make change and adult organizations looking to be part of that change and make their own change. And we built a network that brings them together to develop the next generation of problem solvers by building a network that brings both youth and adults together to work together on the problems that we all care about. And that's SparkShare.
That's great. I love the concept of really asking youth and really seeing youth as change agents along with their adult partners, but really guiding and leading and sharing information that is pertinent and important to them. During COVID, with everything online, were you able to reach further in terms of your networks because of that capacity, or did that reduce your ability to really have that interfacing in person?
I mean, 2020 was tough. That said, COVID forced all of us to learn how to connect like we're doing right now. That's our business. We're a network. We bring people together, and we learn how to do that on Zoom. So in the first part of 2021, we did 2 major events. We did more activity in the first 6 months of 2021 than we did in the entire year before COVID.
Yeah, it's a silver lining that we've heard from lots of folks. So to capitalize on it is so important rather than to lose the momentum. Sabita, I want to go to you. So how did you get involved? Where does your passion lie in this?
Growing up in Dorchester, I definitely am connected to Boston and the city. And I've had 10 years of youth development experience. So I've done a little bit of everything in terms of working directly with young people in the city. Specifically, I've been focused on high school students for most of those 10 years. And I would say that maybe within the past 5 to 6 years, my passion has definitely been connecting high school students to civic engagement work. So getting them invested and involved in the topics and issues that they see in their own community, not necessarily taking a step back and waiting for someone else to come along and help, but figuring out how can we address an issue that we're seeing and get other people interested in that issue. And I would say one of the things that drew me to SparkShare, I just got to a point in my career I was looking to do more, and I was looking to really feel like I was engaging with young people and empowering them in a different way. The hands-on experience was great, but what drew me to SparkShare was the opportunity to create this space where young people are coming to a table where they feel that their voice is valued, they have resources, they have the ability, and adults in that space value them. SparkShare just felt like the natural next progression for me.
So in some ways, what I'm hearing, which I think is incredible, is that you're bringing youth and adults together, but it's youth driven in so many ways. And it's also creating diversity within the space, connecting people who may have very disparate experiences, and yet bringing together and really listening to each other and learning and maybe applying some of those possibilities for change in spaces that they never thought they'd be able to. Have there been some surprise moments for youth when they really feel that they can be a change agent?
What happens in this space is that young people and adults are coming together, and young people are presenting, and they get asked tough questions. Whoa, this person is talking to me as I'm a partner. The fact that they're getting asked questions, they're getting advice, they're being asked for advice from youth and adults is really empowering, and it gives them focus. And I think we hear a lot of stories about how young people step into being leaders in this space. Because if we want to help young people become that next generation of problem solvers, we have to put them in a situation where they can actually solve problems, which invariably is not just in their own organization, but with other organizations across the community.
Right? It gets them out of their space to think more broadly, but it also allows, my guess, is empathy across those lines of communities that didn't exist before because of lack of knowledge and experience of even knowing the other truly existed. And it becomes in real time, real form, which is really, I can only imagine those meetings, whether online or in person, must be magical.
One of our newer youth teams, I think the first time they participated in one of those sessions and realized that one of the adult members who worked for a hospital and was working on developing an alumni program and was really looking for feedback from the young people in her session. Young people from the youth team really, I think they were a bit surprised in when they realized, like, oh, what I just said within that session is something that adult is going to apply, and that's going to help her shape her alumni program. So I think it's one thing when we talk about it and we set them up and they understand what they're going into, and it's another thing when they're in the session and they realize, oh, I'm not just getting feedback or suggestions. The adults in this space, in this session with me, are also looking to me for suggestions and ideas for how they can approach their work.
Yeah, and it must empower those youth then to use those skills in every other environment they're in, because it may, for some, be the very first time that someone not only asked for their opinion, guidance, advice, input, and actually took it. Let's take a step back. Walk me through, either one of you or both in different moments, how this actually works, how people connect, how they volunteer to do this, what kinds of issues come up, just the whole process.
So within a program year, the way in which we bring our network together, we have two large convenings, so our fall and our spring summits. And so that's an opportunity for our entire network to be together, either in person or at this point, because of COVID, maybe hybrid or virtually, wherever that lands. But during those learning opportunities, we're taking them through sessions based on issues or challenges that they've brought up. We're really listening to them and listening to hear what are the things that they want to learn or work on as a team or as a unit, and really pulling the rest of the network to see if that lines up. And that's how we go about creating those learning opportunities in those summits. Outside of our two summits, we also have topic-specific convenings. So that comes up through the network, just based on, what people are focused on. So the first one we did was our racial justice convening. And that was because we knew that, most of our network was focused on that. And we wanted an opportunity for them to come together, and it wasn't us putting on a workshop or putting on a learning opportunity for them, but it was really the network showcasing their work to each other. And then having an opportunity to connect on that. So within each session, really figuring out from each of the 6 presenting teams, what can I learn from what this team is sharing? How can I adapt this work? Is this something that I can put into the work I'm doing? I would say the other way that we try to bring our network together is through those group consulting sessions that we spoke about. We want this SparkShare space and this network to be a resource for them. So for them to be able to communicate to us, we're having a challenge, and we can connect them to other people within our SparkShare network that either is having a similar challenge or would like to come to the table to help them workshop that challenge. So putting together those smaller working sessions.
And if someone has an issue they want it workshopped, do they go through an application process?
I would say that structure we try to incorporate into our summits in some way, or any opportunity that we're bringing people together. But those were so successful on their own. We are moving towards a model where once a month, just creating a space. So as long as they're at least, another team, right? So you really just need two people together or two teams together to be able to workshop something. We want to be able to create those monthly opportunities for people to do that.
I would just add a couple things. I think when we think about the goals of the network, the goals of each convening, as we always say this, is our goals are one, that you've learned something from someone else that you can use in your work to be more effective. Two, that you've made a new connection, a new partner that can amplify your work, spread the work, give you resources. And three, are you inspired by being part of something bigger than yourself? Whenever we're bringing on a new team or we ask a team about the upcoming event, we always say to them, we always ask them, what excites you about being in the space and what concerns you about being in the space? Every time, especially among young people, they are excited about the chance to get out of their neighborhoods and meet other young people who look like them and look different from them, that they can really work together. And then we'll get into this, I suppose, further in the conversation, but part of what we think about in terms of scaling is we're now working on building a virtual platform that will allow the sharing of information, the discussions, the new connections to go on outside of our summits ongoing, so we can continue to kind of explode and build out the network.
Yeah, you sort of read my mind. How large is your network now?
Great question. So we've got about 50 organizational members that include youth teams and organizational members, and that comprises about 200 people. To become a member of the SparkShare network, the currency of the network is I have an idea. That's your ticket to the network. So for a group of young people, they've got a team of young, and our unit is team. So we are bringing in alumni members as individuals, but by and large, we're getting at people coming in as teams of people that come into the network because they believe that the problem they're trying to solve, that they can be more impactful in doing this as part of the network. To be part of the network, you need a team of young people with an idea and a commitment to work on that idea for at least 1 year. Really, it's I have something I'm working on that I am open to listening and sharing with the network. The virtual infrastructure allows us to be better organized with our virtual convenings. I'm trying to figure out, I'm a group of young people in Brookline working, Speak Your Mind, working to increase racial equity in the town of Brookline, and they want people who come into the high school, students, to be more open and aware. And they've got a great program, but they want to spread it. That's a great thing to throw out to the network, either through a discussion group, through a consulting session, but we believe that if we can create the capacity for people to get the help they need in the moment, in real time, that we can really dramatically expand the capacity of our network to really help people make change.
It's great. So part of that is an honest conversation about what that program may be missing, based on the feedback of the network, which I love because we all have our own vantage points, right? I think this is such an amazing model. It begs the question, and I know you're a seed that's planted and blossoming and blooming. Do you imagine, or maybe it's already occurred and I don't know, that this will move into other regions and maybe even globally at some point?
Regionally, that's definitely the goal of having this virtual space and having this online platform. We have a lot of teams that are Boston-based and right outside the city, but even just there's so many other youth teams within Massachusetts that when we transition and launch this thing within the next few weeks, we'll have the opportunity to be able to tap into them. The next gradual step would be, thinking about how else do we scale this?
I think it's been important for us in the last couple of years to get this model right. And of course, we're still working on it, but what does a network look like? How does a network support each other? And once we figure that out, our platform allows us to bring in, and already we're doing it, we're reaching beyond greater Boston into other parts of Massachusetts. As we bring in national partners, there's no reason why we couldn't take this nationally and do this regionally, because the capacity to convene is really straightforward. So absolutely, we see this scaling across the country. by building an expansive network, we can allow initiatives on mental health, on substance use, on racial justice, on youth employment to expand, to be a real force multiplier for change. And the other way to do that is when we talk about our mission of empowering the next generation of problem solvers. It's one thing to say we are helping young people learn how to change the world. But it's another thing to say that we are empowering young people to learn how to change the world with other people, which is how you change the world.
I love that, which means, and I'm guessing, which means your program has to be adaptable and open to change in and of itself. Whatever comes up, you have to address that as part of both the model that you communicate and teach how this model works. And so you have to live by that as well, which is a fascinating case study in and of itself, I think, to a certain extent. It's really remarkable. And so I wonder, as you bring in these teams, what does that orientation look like for a team of youth or for adults who come into your space?
When we bring in a new team, we do have an application. So in that application, I use that kind of loosely because it's more information gathering. What's the topic or issue that you're focused on? Who's a part of your team? What adult is supporting you? What have you identified as your team's strengths or areas that you'd like to further develop? We try to gather all that information up front. I would say we're up front in the onboarding process in terms of opportunities that we have for connectivity. So the summits, our topic-specific convenings, the group consulting sessions. But I think we're also very upfront with the fact that the way in which we craft those opportunities are all based around what we're hearing from the network, because we want to know what they're working on, what issues they're coming up against, so that we can craft things. I would say when people ask us, what does the year look like? We can give a broad structure of the things that will happen, but in terms of specifically what topic will you focus on at this point, we may not know until a little bit closer.
But I think that makes you living what you're communicating. It really is that kind of model. And so does it take groups very long to adapt to that? Because it's such a different way, I imagine, that they've operated in the past.
I think teams get a hang of it. I don't know if Neil has a different experience. But I would say for the most part, they get it. I mean, I think also in terms of their projects. Like Neil said in the beginning, we're conveners, so we're connectors. We want to be able to plug you into resources and opportunities into each other, but we're not controlling the outcome of your project. There's not a timeline. You don't have to be at a certain place at a certain point. It's really all about how do we support your work. I think that it's pretty clear, but Neil?
The reason why I'm smiling is because I think that is a great question, because it just cuts at the core of what we're trying to teach our network, our youth and our adults, is how to solve a problem as part of a network. As Sabita said, I think you're absolutely right that people come into the space and it's instinctive to want to ask a question and be open. I think we work really hard both at listening, but also we work really hard at creating a space and making sure that we don't just invite folks to come to something. Everyone who steps into our space are folks that we've met with. We know what's the problem you've identified, and they have an expectation. And we say this to adults too: is that, look, I want to make sure I say this the right way. We're not inviting you to come in here just to help young people, right? We want you to come in because you can partner with other adults and other young people to solve a problem, and it's a different mindset.
I love it because we often, as I opened this podcast, we often make assumptions about what's in the best interest of another who is younger. And that isn't the case. We have to be asking more questions. And you've created the space, the platform, the network, the environment for that exact thing to happen. So to me, the best thing that comes out of this is a whole host of aha moments for the majority of people who get the pleasure and the luck to be in that space with you. It's really an opportunity for the experience of youth and adult partners to really learn from each other on this next trajectory of change, whatever that is. And I love that. Which for me begs the question, You have to share things that you've witnessed. What have been a few of those aha moments, if you can share some of those? Because there just have to be a plethora of ones where people go, whoa, I hadn't even considered that. Or, boy, that's an interesting perspective.
I'll share a couple from our last convening on racial justice. There was a lot of aha moments in that for us, is that we convene because this is the seminal issue of our day, and we convene because this is what our network is working on. Half of our youth team members are all working on racial justice specifically.
That's great.
The other half and our organization members are working on something that's related to that. And what it did is it really forced us to think about what our value is in this space, not to say this is the agenda for racial justice. It is to lift up other people's agendas and give them the space to support, develop, and be successful on their agendas. And there was a whole bunch of ahas that came out of that. One of the adults who was in there said to me, I learned more. This is just in the first opening part of the agenda, where we were sharing with each other in small, diverse groups about what racial equity looks like to us. In those 15 minutes, I learned more in those 15 minutes than I did reading the Boston Globe for an entire year. And the other thing that is kind of personal to me a little bit, when we started SparkShare, the whole idea was we're going to bring people together to solve big problems. And, well, which people? What problems? And what does it mean to, shared responsibility? What does that really mean? And this kind of showed it to us, is that racial justice is an issue, is something that people experience differently in each community, and each individual experiences it differently. Yet, we had adults and youth from urban and suburban communities take responsibility for solving this problem, taking real ownership over it and how they were going to solve that in their community, and with real openness to learning, not judging by what others are doing. And there were just ahas all over the place.
One that's like top of mind, just because I think it fully puts into display when we talk about adults and adult teams coming to the network. I think about our connection and partnership between ZEPTIV and Somerville Cares About Prevention. So ZEPTIV is one of our adult team that creates a device, a vaping detector. And they're also focused on the education piece of it as well. And our youth team, Somerville Cares About Prevention, the youth at the time were really focused on, addressing vaping within their high school. ZEPTIV was looking for a way to partner with Somerville High, and, they could have directly gone to an adult in the building. They could have found a partnership that way, but because they were also really concerned about the advocacy piece and the education piece, by coming to a SparkShare summit, they were able to connect with this youth team. They were able to meet with them and really every step of the way think about, what would be the benefit of us partnering and having these devices in your school? Is this something that you all would want? The youth team were on board with it. But ZEPTIV was also focused on how do we get feedback from your peers, different ways in which maybe we could go about addressing this issue. That's not just putting a device in bathrooms or putting devices in spaces that maybe young people might typically vape in. So for me, that partnership is a great example of when we think about youth and adults coming to the table and really seeing value in each other as resources. When we talk about our youth teams are typically led by adult member who is their youth team lead, we call them. And so we actually had our first youth team that did not have an adult member leading them. It kind of started, and they were connected through a community center. And honestly, they had so much traction and they had the ball rolling that they felt pretty confident they could lead themselves. And I think initially, I'll just speak for myself. I'll say initially I was a little nervous because having worked directly with young people, I was like, okay, sometimes it's hard to get in contact with them. How is this going to work? We always kind of had a safety net having an adult lead. But honestly, having them in the network and just seeing the amount of work that they were able to get done themselves without an adult lead. So not being connected through a school or organization or a paid opportunity. That for me was an aha moment of for me, number one, it was, okay, this ease my nerves a bit around having other youth teams join that who maybe don't have an adult lead, but they really have the focus and drive to be able to stay connected throughout the full year of programming. But I would say my second aha moment was, this is what we want to see, right? We want to see young people feel so empowered and feel so encouraged to be connected to a network. They're doing this without any sort of backing other than here are our ideas, here's the effort we're putting in, here's the change we want to see. And within this year, Speak Your Mind from Brookline, their focus was, like Neil already said before, was addressing racial equity within their school system. And it adapted over time. They wanted to first focus on high school students, and then they saw an opportunity to get into middle school classes. Teachers were looking for a way to engage their students in a different way. They really tapped into us. They really tapped into other people in the network. I would say their first year was very productive.
It's such a great example also of what I spoke about before, that you walk the talk, you really do, whatever that expression is, because it is an example of the flexibility within your system to take on this group of students who didn't have that adult or team lead. And, of course, with some trepidation, and yet it is the future. Huge kudos for kind of sitting tight, holding your breath a little bit. I feel that. Sometimes herding cats, not a negative. They'll get there in their own time. But it's a great example of the flexibility within the structure or the network that you all have created, and perpetuate by example. Rather than shutting the door, you're opening it and say, let's experiment and see how this works. Any other pieces you want to share before we get into our quick and gutsy questions that I always end the podcast with?
As we said earlier, a big part of achieving our mission is enabling our members to connect while not convene. And we're working with a third-party provider. Actually, it's called HighBright. They're a vendor, and we're building a platform off their system, and we're actually halfway through, and we hope to launch that as part of our work. I want to just kind of make one more comment on building off of what Sabita was saying. Is that our experience is that the young people in our network are less attached to their mental models than the adults in our network are. And when we design a program, a summit, a learning session, we don't say, well, we're going to design this for a 16-year-old. We don't do it. We just design the program. Invariably, it works. And the young people in our network kind of grasp onto a model and pick it up really quickly. And it gives us a sense of real hope for the future, because this is the one more thing I'd say about the network. In this moment in time, with what's happening in the world, I find participating in the network to be really healing because of the future that we're all trying to create together.
This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. So, on to our quick and gutsies, if you're ready for these. What is at the top of your wish list for SparkShare? However, the answer can't be money or funding.
The technology part at some level is easy to construct a platform, but that we can figure out the way to get folks to engage in it. The second part of our wish list, my wish list, is really in the messaging, and that we're able to, in the coming months, really clearly articulate why what we do is important and how it works in a way that people kind of can get behind it.
Sabita, what's at the top of your wish list for SparkShare?
I would say name recognition. So when someone hears SparkShare, they see the logo, they're able to quickly connect it to, oh, okay, this is a network, right? So if I have a challenge, or I know young people that are working on something, this is a resource. It's an easy transition, top of the list for me.
If you were to think of a song that describes SparkShare, Sabita's laughing, what would it be?
Do you want me to go first, Adele? You wouldn't tell me. So for me, what came to mind, so Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror, just because one of the things that we push for is that, anything that you want to change or anything that you want to take action on, it starts somewhere. And I think it starts with each one of our members individually. And so whether they bring other people into that and, work on it or not, that was like the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, I love it. You have to do some reflective work. You have to really know who you are in that space and then be open. I love it. It's a great song. Great choice. Neil.
I actually listen to this song every day. It's how I start my day.
Wow.
It's a singer-songwriter, this guy named Noah Aronson, put to music a prayer from the Sabbath prayer book. And it's called Standing on the Parted Shores. And it talks about how we are all all of us are standing on the parted shores of history. Wherever we go, we're turning to Egypt. But as you listen to the song, it talks about there's a better place, a promised land, and the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, and there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together.
Wow.
It embodies for me what we're trying to build.
Sometimes we get the best pearls in these quick and gutsies, and that, I think, was an aha moment for Sabita, too. She didn't know that about you. But you're talking about a shared piece of the individual and the community and how you're joining that together in both of those songs that you shared, and I think they're both amazing choices. Thank you for that. What makes SparkShare gutsy? How is SparkShare gutsy?
I actually think we've touched on this and you've touched on this, but I would say our ability to adapt and adjust to our network's needs. Yeah. So, we're not afraid to listen, to move things around when they need to be moved around, and to do something new, like Neil touched upon earlier. At the top of 2021, we'd never done a virtual convening, and, we did our summit virtually.
I mean, just echoing what Sabita said about we're not afraid to try new things. We do it all the time. But I would say, in addition, is that we are not afraid to bring people together who don't typically come together, and not just trust that we can build the space, because that's the easy part. We can trust ourselves, right? But that we're putting a lot of trust in the network and the people that are joining the network. And we're not afraid to try it.
What is something that outsiders, or maybe even a few insiders, don't know about SparkShare?
Everything that we deliver, every program we do, whether it's the Mount Everest simulation in January, we're doing a marketing session in December, comes from within the network, comes from another organization that's part of a network that kind of offers a resource that already exists in the world, that we're not asking for resources to create this new resource. We are leveraging this resource. And I'm not sure that the extent to which we're leveraging existing resources is really fully understood by the world around us.
Sabita, any add-ons to that?
Oh, that was a good answer. I would say, I echo Neil. I think maybe if you're on the outside looking at our model, you might think that we have a set list of themes or learnings that would happen every year. There's actually a lot of work that goes into trying to collect that information from the network.
So if you could get one celebrity or influencer to endorse or talk about SparkShare, who might that be?
So who came to mind for me was Jaden Smith. So Will and Jada's son. I think right now he's doing like great civic engagement work. And I guess when I just think about like a young, fresh face, a young person that, sees a need and addresses it. Everything he's done in the past few years has been really just grassroots, and he's been really focused on the homeless population. And so literally anything that he's thought about, he's brought to life. And I think that's someone who, if we could get to talk about SparkShare, Jaden, if you hear.
I love when people who have a platform use it in that capacity. It's quite remarkable and quite beautiful. Neil, what about you?
Well, I think this will also complement what Sabita said. In an instant, Barack Obama empowering, connecting people to change their world.
Yes.
In fact, that's the mission of his foundation. His Brothers Keepers program is all about youth. He's just always been about transformational change. Has always resonated with me, so I would love to have him endorse our program.
Great choices, both of them great choices, both from an inspirational lens and from a how-to roll up your sleeves, like people who are really doing the work. They don't just talk about the work, which is what your program is all about. So what is the best way for folks to reach you? If folks want to join your network, get connected, learn about you, what is the best way to do that?
Absolutely. So, directly you can reach out. My email, sjarba@sparkshare.org. We also have a website, www.sparkshare.org. We're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You can find us many different ways.
So I just want to take a moment and thank you both for joining Small and Gutsy on this podcast and sharing so much about SparkShare, both your individual passion and your collective mission in how this network has grown and continues to grow and what it offers in terms of change, really, truly change for our current and hopefully future environment.
Thank you for this opportunity. We find that every time we talk about our network in this way, we learn something new about what we do. So we're really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you. And love the work that you do in Small and Gutsy and resonate with that mission.
Absolutely. This was great. Thank you so much for giving us the platform and space. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a Small and Gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small-and-gutsy. Just an FYI, for those of you who might want to be a Small and Gutsy patron, we just released our Patreon site with some really fun first edition Small and Gutsy merchandise. So check us out to support this effort at patreon.com/small-and-gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my social media maven, Delania Tirado, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, without whom I could not have created this project, my very best friend and a true sounding board. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.